With me on the stage is the German ambassador, Walter J. Lindner. Now, if you look at the India-European cooperation itself, this year actually we celebrate 60 years of those diplomatic relations with the European Economic Community as it was known then. And it's an important time. You know, India was among the first countries, also the first Asian country really to establish this diplomatic tie. Now, with so much happening, there's been a change in leadership in Germany. With Europe, of course, we are working also closely on the Indo-Pacific itself, and then there's the shadow of the Ukrainian crisis. Plus, all the questions from the young audience here, the youth, the scholars, the students would be more than welcome. Ambassador Lindner, if I could start with you a little bit on the Indo-German front, and then I'll expand it to the Indo-European ties itself. The Merkel era is now over. What the political era that has now begun, what is the one significant change that you see shaping up in the bilateral front?
I think the relationship between India and Germany always have been very good and close. But the tactical or the strategic angle is relatively new. As we move on, we see that the world is more and more and more connected. For you, it's important what happens in the Ukraine, and for us, it's important what happens in Taiwan, in the Strait of Taiwan, or close to the between India and China. So the world is interconnected. This is an old saying. Of course, you know that. But in this digital world and in a world where things are happening faster and faster and faster, we are all a big family. So we have to behave. Of course, we are already in the United Nations, a big family, but also in the bilateral relationship, climate issues can only be solved together by all the nations. And you're talking about India. India is so big, 1.4 billion, so every fifth person on this planet is Indian. So without India, you can't solve any of the global challenges, be it poverty reduction, be it plastic, be it climate change, and also peace, and the new world order and these kind of things. You need India. You need China also, by the way, because also every fifth person is Chinese. So we need a cooperative spirit. Now, that's easier said than done, as we see in Ukraine and other places, or in places where you have hardliners. It's not all sunshine out there. We know, let's not be naive, but still we need friends. And India is a close friend. It's the biggest democracy in the world. And the relations between India and Europe, I guess, are warmer and warmer because we know we sit in the same boat and we need each other. And apart from that, we have a lot of common interests.
How do you see the priority of Europe changing when it comes to India's foreign policies? How has that developed? Do you think even in terms of the smaller European nations today, that diplomatic engagement has intensified way more than it was in the 90s?
Sure, because the importance of India has grown in the last decade. And of course, every continent lives in its own surrounding. We have, as Germany, we have 10 neighbors, which are all very far from India. And India, you have, I don't know, 6 or 7 neighboring nations which are far from Germany. So we don't have common neighbors. We have not a common history. We have different languages, but still we live on the same planet, and we do have cultural ties. And between Europe and India, there have been long relationship during the last 5,000 years. And this goes on until now. And these days, as I said before, I think the digital age and the age of seeing pandemics, seeing economic disasters around the globe, and seeing political turmoil and dictatorships around the globe, we moved closer together because we share a democratic system and we share respect for human rights. And so I think respect for parliaments. So there are a lot of common ground. Even we are far away and you speak your languages and we speak other languages in Europe, but there's a lot of common ground you will see.
The growing interest for Europe in the Indo-Pacific, of course, this is one of the regions which has become the epicenter of geopolitics in many ways today. And it also accounts for nearly 60% of the world's population. Where does Europe kind of see itself, the role that it plays in the Indo-Pacific today?
If I speak as the German ambassador, then you will see we have been, or we are almost still the world champion in trade. So we depend totally our economy totally on trade, foreign trade. So in most of the trade goes, or a lot of the big part of the trade, I guess 45% or so, goes through the Indo-Pacific. So all our container ships, they run more than or half of them run through the Indo-Pacific. So we have an interest in a peaceful area here. So no illegal occupation of things, no disrespect of law of the sea, and peaceful settlement of disputes. That's important for us as a trading nation, but also as a peace-loving nation, which is interested, of course, in maintaining the a world peaceful situation. It's important to contribute together with India that also this part of the world will be in a peaceful course. There have been turmoils in the area. You don't forget we have 4 nations in the possession of nuclear weapons, and there are border disputes, and there are some authoritarian regimes. That's why we have to keep an eye on all these areas in the world, and I think Germany is more active than before now because we notice the grown importance of Indo-Pacific.
But are the European nations really on the same page when it comes to the Indo-Pacific strategy, especially vis-a-vis China? There does seem to be significant differences in the approach of the member states.
This question can only be asked by you because you're a tough journalist. True. I mean, different nations have, of course, also some nuances which are different. We all have some different. Some are more trading partners, others are less. More, so that it's natural. But we have an Indo-Pacific European strategy, a common strategy of all the 28 countries. So this is already the common denominator. Some of us, like France, Germany, and the Netherlands, we have also bilateral strategies, which are very similar to the European. Now, of course, as the biggest trading nation, as the biggest economic nation in Europe, Germany has very close ties, economic ties also to China. But so does India, so do other countries. A smaller country who has not ties, economic ties with China or with India, of course, has a little bit different kind of visible interests in the area. But I think that's one of the good things of the European Union, that we share in solidarity our common interests. If some nation has more interest, then even the smaller nations take this up, and vice versa. So I think all in all, there might be nuances, but we have a common interest in the area.
Okay, before I open up the stage to the audience here and ask for their questions specifically on the issues of sustainable development goals, on how do you see the youth factor playing out, I do need to ask you a couple of questions on the burning crisis today, which is Ukraine. Ambassador, and I think we're having this conversation on a day when we have seen that special session of the United Nations Security Council. India too has taken a measured stand. Your thoughts, first of all, on, do you really see an invasion of Ukraine happening?
First of all, there's a huge build-up by the Russian army, which is uncalled for and not explicable. Why 100,000 soldiers there? But second, I think we have to try. We have to do everything possible to have a peaceful solution there. War and killings between soldiers is never a solution, never. And the price will be paid by both sides and will be tangible around the globe. So we have to walk the extra mile and the extra mile. And so far, I think there's still the 2 foreign ministers, Lavrov and the American foreign minister, are still on for a meeting on tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. I think we have to keep up the channels because, we lived in 40 years in separation between Eastern Bloc, Cold War, and the Western free world. And we maintained contact to the eastern side, because if you break up talks, then there's a dead-end road. You can't do that. And Germany, who was causing at least one world war, the last one, maybe even the first one. We have caused millions and millions and millions of deaths, killed people. We know how terrible military can be. Peaceful settlements afterwards, peacekeepers, that's a different thing, but we know in our own history what military can be misused for. That's why we have a special relationship in our country towards the use of military force. That's why the last straw should always be a diplomatic solution. And as long as there are diplomats running around and as long as there is hope, we should do this. Everyone should refrain from exacerbation of the situation, and we must avoid war. But international law must be respected as the Minsk agreement. So there is a balance between one side, we have to respect international law, make sure that this is not an illegal action happening, but on the other side, use diplomatic channels as long as it's possible.
But what about Russia signing, President Putin signing the executive orders today on the renaming of basically the recognition of the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic? Where is it headed? Do you think this is still about posturing? What kind of questions does it cast about the future of NATO itself in the region?
Yeah, we said it's an illegal action to violate the Minsk agreement. So this is clear, and this is we have to respect the international law, and this is disrespecting international law. What are the consequences of this? This is discussed as we sit here in the European Union, whether there would be what kind of I think not whether, but what kind of sanction would be imposed now. Because if somebody breaches the international law, there should be consequences. And we have always said, yes, peaceful settlement, but also consequences, economic consequences, financial consequences, if somebody crosses a red line. And this is discussed as we speak here, so that's why I don't want to anticipate the results of these discussions in Brussels.
But for India, of course, India stands so far because India is a part of the Quad, where we have the other three partners. We have seen them come out categorically and condemn Russia's actions. India has taken a measured stand so far on this issue. It has been talking about diplomacy and de-escalation being the need of the hour. It also has that very tightrope balancing act that it does when it comes to the CAATSA sanctions from the US itself on the Russian acquisition of the Triumph missile. So, your thoughts on the Indian statements today? How is Europe looking at it? How is Germany looking at it?
I think it would not be a good move to comment here on the stage what the Indian position is like. I think we should ask an Indian colleague there, the Security Council, but very many of these words were also used by ourselves. Restrained from escalation and using all the diplomatic efforts. Now, all the other questions, was this an illegal act by Putin and others, you would have to ask the Indian government. I said for us, there's a red line which was crossed, but the consequences we will discuss right now.
Germany will be completely aligned with the US-led West actions on
We discussed
Russia.
It exactly. We have discussed this before. We have said if Russia crosses a red line, then there will be consequences, and we will make public the consequences after such an action is done. And these discussions are now happening, I guess, in the NATO, but especially in the European Union, including by your foreign minister, by the way, who happens to be in Brussels at the moment for Indo-Pacific discussions. But I can imagine that in the couloirs there will be also Ukraine very high on the agenda.
Just one last question on this. If hypothetically, if the tensions continue and if they only intensify, how do you see this impacting the European interest in Indo-Pacific? Would it lead to a lesser appetite, maybe, for the European presence on the Indo-Pacific itself? And also, how do you see it impacting, especially when it comes to the global oil prices, the global gas situation? If the situation does not stabilize anytime soon.
Sure. I mean, that's what we said from the beginning. Why is Russia, bringing 100,000 people encircling the Ukraine? This leads to a lot of tension and to the danger that there might be a conflict there. And we don't need a conflict because it will have repercussions on the international oil price, on the global peace, on many things. So don't do that. But still, he made this speech yesterday, so we will see how we react without bringing the whole world into financial or economic turbulences. So I think that's the balanced way we have to do. We have to see what we can do. But again, it was not us who brought this up.